Hello, folks, and welcome to Totally Tank, the tankiest podcast in Tankville. I'm Rob.
And I am John, and this episode is episode 76, recording and streaming live on 8 November 2025. And today we're talking about the Tour de France champion, the Panzer II.
Before we get onto that, let's clear some things up that John got wrong last episode. And whilst, of course, I never make a mistake, they're all deliberate errors for you to spot and make you feel good that you know something that I don't. You're welcome. And John.
So our first Centurion episode was recorded in 2021, not 2020. And given that I ran an election campaign in late 2020 very successfully, I really should have remembered that our COVID lockdowns didn't hit until the next year. Also Bovington's FV 4005 is not still being restored. It's roaring and racing around the track. Thank you to everyone who reached out to let us know about that. Also, in the subject of Bovington, their Mark 5 tank is not a replica, it's an original. I was probably thinking of their A7V. And of course it gets better. The Military Heritage YouTube channel has been in touch to let us know that the slide last month purporting to be a South African elephant in Johannesburg was in fact a Centurion Mark 5A. Wikipedia appears to have let me down there. But in fairness to Wikipedia, I've gone through museum archive photo captions that have got a much, much higher failure rate. So sometimes mistakes get through in anyone's systems. Anyway, we try to correct our errors and then we move on around here. Just quickly, we've got people on the live stream. Antonioa is coming to us from Vancouver. They used to be in Ottawa, we think. Raghau's joining us from Melbourne. Jonas Bond is in, and there we go. And Alan is here as Maga Mall. Okay. We'll see where we go with that. Now, please do head to totallytank.net and put yourself on our mailing list or subscribe to our RSS feed, as it's the only reliable way we have to make contact if the billionaires move against independent media. We don't send out that many emails, we promise, maybe 4 per month, absolute tops. Also, do please hit any like buttons or subscribe buttons, make heaps of comments, even mean ones, it all helps. Although we prefer the not mean ones. We had a bit of a viral breakout on Facebook this month, Rob, over 40,000 views. And that meant we had viral commentary from Facebook men, old Facebook men. One of whom called me Beardy Weirdy, which I thought was a funny way to introduce yourself to someone. Anyway, let's...
And welcome to Hayden Fletcher as well.
Oh, g'day, Hayden. Good to have you on the stream. Cool.
All right. Also, we need to adjust something important. Did you know this guy has a podcast about tanks and beer? Now, John, do you want to share your moment of advertising fame that has happened in the last month as well?
Yes, so Opus Clip, which is what we use to make the shorts and the clips and the like, put out a thing where they said, hey, if you use Opus Clip, you send us a little description of what you use it for, and if we use you in your ad, we'll give you some free credits. So I sent it in, and they did use it, and they showed it to over 1 million people. It's the opening line. This guy's got a podcast about tanks and beer.
And a photo of John. Hang on. That's crazy. Yeah, there you go. Anyway, back to our tank. Right, Panzer II. When is a tank not a tank? It's when it's an agricultural tractor. The LAS 100 is what it started out as. And just when you think you know your SD KFZs from your ALFs or your VKs or your PZ KPFWs, those wacky fascists decide to change things a bit to keep you on your toes, as the Panzer II started out as an ALF lowercase a, then B and C, before becoming an AUS capital A, B, C, A, B, and C, and so on.
I remember this was before the internet, so if someone's got a confusing bit of documentation, they can't go online and check it anywhere. They just gonna be like, I don't know what this thing is. I imagine incorrect parts were ordered many times on the basis of this. But,
who knows? But
I do like the agricultural tractor, though. It's, we're not allowed to have tanks under the Treaty of Versailles. It's just a tractor.
It's a heavily armoured tractor without a turret that can be fitted later on. Anyway, but it was also in the range of the SD KFZ 1212-140 range and had a VK numbers of 9, 13 and 16, 16 for the experimental Leopard. But mainly it was known as the Panzerkampfwagen 2 or Panzer II. We'll touch on the Marder II and the Wesp as well, and how they got their names.
Oh, and the Lukes we are saying is a Panzer II, which we'll get to. We'll discuss why. People have views on that.
Of course it's a Panzer II.
Yeah.
Would it be just a Panzer II? It's exactly a Panzer II. Anyway, stats. We'll quickly go over the stats of the three main types of light tank. to come from the Panzer II, or as I like to think of them, the 3 tanks you like to play in World of Tanks. And then we'll get on to the Marder II and the Wesp later on, as they are mostly conversions of the Panzer II.
Now, for those who are watching on YouTube, and all the slides will be on the website for the audio listeners, there's a lot of pictures of Marder II crews in the slideshow, and Marder II crews always look happy. Their uniforms are always really nicely pressed. They look happy. You know, there's many a German picture of people looking absolutely miserable. There it is right there. Look how happy they all look. But these are the Marder II guys always seem happy, which, considering there's no armor on that turret, yeah.
There you go.
I guess they didn't live long enough to get miserable.
No. Well, yeah, they went for by the axiom: ambush is murder and murder is fun, and away they go. Because otherwise they were not going to survive. All right, Panzer II. It's a light tank. Funnily enough, produced from 1935 to January 1944. They built 1,856, excluding conversions. Mass of 9 tons, length of 4.81 meters, width 2.22 meters, height 2 meters. Crew of 3. Commander, who was also the gunner, and he was also the loader, and then the driver and the radio operator.
The fact that there was a radio operator just leisurely being on the radio was part of its success, but the whole C3 stuff. But
the radio operator also assisted the commander loading the gun. So basically, he'd hand the rounds, the magazines over, or something like that, or whatever else.
It's a 10-round magazine of 20 mil. It's a hefty old magazine.
So he didn't actually whack the rounds in or anything else like that. He just handed it over from where it was stored in the tank. All right. Armour. After Poland, they had 30 mils on the hull front and the turret, and 10 to 15 mils elsewhere around the tank. They had less beforehand, so only 15 mils on the front and around the tank.
So paper thin. In any less, it's not really armour at all. And certainly proof against rifle rounds, small arms. But you start getting to bigger caliber machine guns, you'd start to be getting nervous.
They had learned a lesson from the Spanish Civil War that being on protection from shell fragments and anti-tank rifles was what was required. And when they put it in, they thought, look, we just need to survive against machine guns and small arms. But once you started coming up against artillery and anti-tank rifles, you needed more armour, which is what they found out in Poland. We do get a thing. Everyone who knows a bit about World War II laughs at anti-tank rifles about how useless they were. But we mentioned before that even at in 1945 against Panthers, if you could shoot between the road wheels into the side armour down there, they could penetrate. Definitely a Panzer II was in significant peril when it was being fired on by an anti-tank rifle. So they weren't as silly as they looked. And also this armour was what the British were aiming to defeat with their 2-pounder as well. They're like, okay, if that's what the enemy's got, we need a gun. 2-pounder gets through this quite nicely.
Oh, yeah. And the thing with the 2-pounder, it was the smallest possible gun that could easily penetrate this armour, which simplified a lot of other things for the British for a long time. All right. The main armament was only a 2-centimetre L55 autocannon with 180 rounds, carried in magazines of 10. Secondary armament was a MG34. Engine was a Maybach 6-cylinder petrol engine with 140 horsepower. Suspension was a leaf spring suspension, but there were a few other ways that they tried out. The Luch went for the full torsion bar and overlapping road wheels. Well, that wasn't the first one. Anyway, fuel capacity 170 litres. Operational range on road is 190 kilometres, as it's 377 kilometres from Germany to Paris via the Maginot Line, or 237 kilometres from Belgium, so at least one stop for gas along the way. Maximum speed of course, they could fill up at the French petrol stations, unlike the French tanks. Maximum speed of only 40 kilometres an hour, so not that fast, but fast enough. Now, the other fun one, we're talking about the Luch, which means lynx, as in the small feral cat, wild cat, whatever you want to call it. Feral. It was the one I chose for the Can You Guess the Tank competition, was a Luch, and that was... that was chosen largely because it didn't have a museum plaque in front of it. And I do want to say, for anyone taking pictures of tanks in museums, it's okay to move the plaques out of the way for your shot as long as you put them back where you found them. You're respectful, but it really helps the photograph if it doesn't have the plaque sitting in the front. All right, so the Luch was a light tank in service from 1943 to 1945, produced from September of 1942 through till January 1944. They only built 100, with it weighed almost 12 tonnes at 11.8 tonnes,
length of 4.63 meters, width 2.42 meters, and height 2.21 meters. Crew 4. Commander, who was also the loader, the driver, a gunner, and an operator, the radio operator. So they actually managed to fit a second person in the turret because they had a bigger turret, because of redesign, had a bigger turret. Armor, they had 30 mils on the front and the turret, and with sometimes added another 20 mils around the on the front and the turret, with 20 mils of armor on the sides and rear. Main armament again was the 2 centimeter. This time it's the KWK 38 with slightly longer 65. L65s, slightly longer and centrally positioned.
So quite a different looking turret, because the defining characteristic of the Panzer II is you've got the quite big machine gun sticking on one side and then the autocannon on the other, and almost looks like it's got, you know, two cannons in the turret.
And the poor old commander sitting there trying to
load both
and fire both and deal with everything, and still at the same time looking out through his cupola that didn't have any periscope, so he had to stick his head out. Engine was on the Luch was the Maybach 6-cylinder petrol engine with 180 horsepower. Suspension was torsion bar suspension with 235 litres of fuel. On-road operational range of 260 kilometres and maximum speed of 60 k's an hour.
Now, Raghow is asking, is the Luch actually a different vehicle? We've fallen on the side of the argument that says no, it really was a evolution of Panzer II.
It's called a Panzer II L.
Yeah, sure.
Alf's L.
Yeah, it was the Ausfell as well. Yeah. So, but I definitely see the point of view that it was a significant evolution. And Cornelius has joined us from Costco. You know, you're meant to have your eyes open in Costco, mate. You've got to duck and weave around those overloaded trolleys. But good luck.
Yep. I admire the dedication of jumping in from there. All right, then we have the VK16.02, which became known as the Leopard. It was never produced, but they thought about it really, really hard. It was designed in 1942. It was mass of 22 tons, length 4.74 meters, width 3.1 meters, and height 2.6 meters.
But 22 tons. The base model is less than half that. I bet that's what putting armor plate on things does. Yeah.
Yep. Armor, they had 50 mils on the front of the turret, and 30 mils on the side, and down to 16 mils on the top of the vehicle. Main armament was going to be a 50 mil gun, the KWK 39, with 50 rounds, and secondary armament of the MG42 because they wanted to make it more modern. The engine was going to be the Maybach HL 157 with 550 horsepower.
That's a lot of horsepower.
That's a lot of horsepower.
This tank.
And we've got Grumble Mark from Japan. Hi.
Oh, g'day, mate.
So yeah, a lot of horsepower, transmission, semi-automatic, so changing gears much quicker and faster, suspension, torsion bar suspension, overlapping road wheels, operational range of 500 kilometres on road.
That's amazing.
Maximum speed of 45 kilometres. Well, again, they looked at it, they did up some wooden designs, wooden mock-ups, but they'd never actually built this thing.
Okay, so some of these numbers aren't real, but yeah, they
thought about them?
They're anticipated or hoped for. Yep.
They thought about them a lot. All right, design and development. The Germans knew where they wanted to go with their tanks, having one support the infantry and take out the fortifications with the Panzer IV, and one to take out the tanks, being the Panzer III. But their industry and the design just wasn't up to the task in 1936.
Can you remind me again, Rob, how this concept actually differs from the much maligned British concept of cruiser tanks and infantry tanks? I mean, the roles are slightly different, but the idea is fundamentally pretty similar, and the British get mocked for it, and the Germans just went and did it and didn't get mocked for it.
Because one was better than the other?
Well, the German ones were generally all better than...
because they were more generalist, whereas once you start specialising your tanks, they can't do either role, whereas as the Germans showed with the Panzer IV, it can do, once it's a generally good tank, then you can do either role if you want to take out fortifications and go with the infantry or take out tanks.
Yeah, and the Panzer III and IV actually swapped over in their service life, with the Panzer III becoming the...
Still.
Yeah, but also... Yeah. Anyway, it's just something I always find a bit interesting. And then you've got the British with their infantry tanks not having a high explosive round. But, here we have in the Panzer II... this is essentially a machine gun carrier, and because everyone thought machine guns were the decisive arm, and as the war went on, they went like, oh no, actually, high explosive is
useful,
much more useful in general. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So the experience of the Panzer I in Spain showed that they needed something now that could take out enemy tanks. So the Panzer II was designed with the 20mm autocannon as being enough to deal with the majority of tanks at the time. So looking at your Vickers 6-ton and so forth.
And your Russian BTs. And it did come with a useful high explosive round, which in a 20mm, hello British saying you can't put high explosive in a 40mm round. And it also, with the tungsten cord armor-piercing rounds, was very effective. The problem was that the typical German war planning, they hadn't said how much tungsten have we got and how much we're going to need to fight a war, so that it became
and
almost...
What else going to be used for that's got a higher priority?
Higher priority. Will we actually have any tungsten rounds when we get into fighting? And the answer was no. No, you're not going to have the tungsten rounds.
Welcome to Hans. No, you didn't miss out on the beer tube. All right, this was to be the interim solution until the Panzer III and IV could be built. The first design was based on the armoured tractor chassis of the LAS 100 that came from the Klein tractor project. That would set the stage for the Panzer I with the layout of the chassis and the suspension as well as the radio operator in the hull.
And let's just stress, a radio in every hull. And for when we get to why this weird little tank with barely adequate armament was actually extremely successful, everyone having a radio, giving extremely good command, control and communications has a lot to do with it. We've got a poll going, Rob.
We do. Was the Panzer II a misguided stopgap or all the tank they needed? Feel free to jump on and span the poll as much as you like, as much as you can. And go from there. We'll see what we're like.
Yes. Anyway, at the moment, it's 89% all the tank they needed. We'll see how that goes through the course of the show.
Yeah. All right, with the addition of the turret, it became the lowercase Alf's A, and they hadn't quite learned what a good turret was at that stage, as they'd only been building armoured hulls, not turrets, because as we were saying before, you're allowed to build a tractor that has armour on it, but you weren't allowed to build turrets.
A turret was really starting to push the definition of tractor,
it's a
wasn't
roof,
it?
Roof for the tractor that happens to have a lot of armour on it.
Sometimes the farmer likes to turn around and look.
So the Alf's A had a one-man turret where the commander was the gunner, commander and loader with some help from the loading from the radio operator for both the MG34 and the 20mm gun. They wouldn't add a second person to the turret of a light tank until September 42 in the Luch. From that start, it was clear they had a successful vehicle from initial trials and decided to make changes to the second batch, which became the Alf's B lowercase. The hull length was increased, which improved the cooling of the engine compartment. The tank's mass grew, but so did the power-to-weight ratio, as they were able to install a more powerful engine into the larger compartment. But there were still some suspension issues, as the leaf springs were only lasted 500 kilometres before they had to be replaced.
I just find that crazy because, leaf springs in cars are basically an indestructible component of the car. They
obviously didn't have enough.
To be smashing up your leaf springs. But this does get to, as tanks get heavier, the material science starts to give way and you need more and more exotic solutions. Similarly, the rubber rims on the road wheels.
As the leaf springs only lasted 500 kilometres and the rubber rims on the small road wheels did not last much longer than that. So the second batch of changes sought to fix most of the issues and became the Alf's lowercase c. The tank became a little longer, a little wider and a little taller. The weight increased again, and so another bigger engine was installed, which was the Maybach 62 TR 140 horsepower engine.
Just a couple of comments I want to address as we're going on here. Alan's asking how much of a Panzer II was brought over from the Soviet, Socialist, Russian and Germans training together. Certainly the agricultural tractor space, there was a lot of that collaboration that the Germans and the Russians did in the interwar years. Jonas is asking what's the difference between Alfs and, I think he's saying Alfs with a capital A. It's more that there was the lowercase a, b and c and then the uppercase a, b and c. As different
or maybe
vehicles.
You just can't understand most of the accent.
There's that too. While Bill Cox has noted that a recon vehicle should have a 3-man turret crew, not 2, as the tank commander must remain free to look around. Totally agree. This tank got shoehorned into a recon role because it was a light tank, and it was really not well set up for that, which is something that they started to solve when they actually got to the L variant. But
the power-to-weight ratio still drops, but the tank's manoeuvrability did not suffer. The fuel tank was changed to allow it to be filled from the engine deck instead of from the side, and the suspension was replaced with an independent leaf spring suspension and reduced the road wheels to 5, but made them bigger. This became the end of development, having managed to create a very reliable suspension, and vehicles on this chassis were produced until June 44, and the mass of some of them reached 11 or even 18 tonnes.
I did love that the bridge layer variant, on a 9-ton tank, laid a bridge that was something like 12 metres across, which is not an enormous span, and that could only take an 8-ton vehicle crossing it. So, I mean, it's not useless in that you can get some 5-ton trucks across.
You get your trucks across. It's for your logistics, I guess. But means your bigger bridges can prioritise the heavier stuff.
Sure, but it did seem like an inadequate bridge layer, just as it was an inadequate flamethrower because it was fundamentally a very small light chassis. But, yeah.
All right, so when the contract went out in June of 36, it went to Mann and Henschel and Sohn, as Krupp, who had been doing most of the design work, was left out as they were already building the Panzer I. The Alfs C, lowercase, became the pilot vehicles for the Alfs capital A, which started in October 37 from Henschel and Son, which quickly became the Panzer II Alfs capital B tanks, rolling out in December 37. Even in February 37, when production was still ramping up, it was clear the Panzer II was only an interim vehicle, but the Panzer III was having suspension issues and could not get into production fast enough. So further companies that should have been building Panzer IIIs were then brought in to build the Panzer II. Alket started producing the Alfs B in 1938, and the Alfs C started rolling out in June of 38 when MIAG, M-I-A-G, was brought onto the contract. The last company brought on was Famo with the.
Who made the enormous half tracks? Yep.
They were the last company brought in, but the need for repair spares from the Polish campaign meant that Famo did not actually finish the tank until November 1939. From 1939, the Panzer battalion started being filled by Panzer IIs, pushing out the Panzer Is as they waited for the Panzer IIIs to come online. The Panzer I remained the most numerous tank of 1,445 units built, and the unplanned Panzer II was the most numerous frontline tank with 1,151 units built. These tanks were the bulk of the Polish campaign.
Basically, all the good times for the Russians, Poland, it's not good times for the Russians, good times for the Germans, Poland, France, and to extent even in Barbarossa, Panzer II was still making up an enormous proportion of their tanks. It was actually Panzer IIs. And of course, we've spoken at length before about the PZ-38T, which... its gun doesn't look enormous, but compared to a Panzer II,
twice the size.
Yeah, doesn't fire as fast. But so it's worth remembering that most of the great successes of the Wehrmacht in World War II was in this quite lightly armed vehicle, extremely lightly armoured. But it had a radio, and they could swarm with it. And they did take quite significant losses. The Poles destroyed a very large number. The Germans had a long, hard think about that before they invaded France.
Which is why they started adding extra armour to it. Such a large number of tanks meant a large number of losses. 83 Panzer II's tanks were lost irreparably, and a large number were damaged. The main enemy of the Panzer II was not enemy tanks, but anti-tank rifles. Polish units also had a large number of anti-tank rifles, which were effective against the German armour. So,
again, not the stereotype description of the war we get, but that's the reality, we think. Yeah.
So outcomes of Poland, the evaluation of the Panzer II as a result of the Polish campaign was unclear. Some complained that the 2-centimetre KWK-38 was not powerful enough. Others praised its effectiveness, but demanded high explosive shells. The evaluation of the armour was unanimous. It was too weak. In addition, there were complaints about the commander's visibility.
Which is, again, to its problems as a scout vehicle.
Yeah. So he had a cupola, but no vision. So he had to stick his head out of the hatch at that stage.
Look, tank commanders, I mean, it's a bit like warship captains never like going into the armoured conning tower, and tank commanders always like having their heads out of the tank. But there just comes a point in real combat against a peer opponent that they just die too quickly.
Yep. And
Britta Dignance has joined us. Hello.
Hello. Work on improving the Panzer II began in October 39. A set of additional armour plates was developed covering the front of the hull and the turret platform, the front of the turret, and in some cases the gun mantlet. The additional plates were 15 to 20 millimetres thick. The tank's front armour increased to 30 to 35 millimetres. The first sets of additional armour began arriving in February of 1940. However, there was no rush with supplies. Only a small number of Panzer IIs received additional armour by May of 1940. Another improvement was the TZF-4 sight with the new scale put into the sight, enabling accurate fire out to 1,200 metres.
That's impressive for an autocannon. But yeah.
No, it's still firing. Just, yeah, harmless. You guys remember me from Cairns?
Britta.
Yes, Britta. Yes.
So just the way your name appears there, buddy.
Yeah,
anyway, good to see you here.
That's not the way I'd spell it. Yeah.
Getting in before the social media ban catches you. Good work.
Operators. Well, it was the Nazis and their friends, so the operators of the tank and conflicts. Now, there are some rumours that the Condor Legion took a couple of Panzer IIs down to Spain for the Civil War for training and use as command tanks, but there's no photos of it, and I've never seen any proper documentation that they went. Still, if you were testing out and training your Panzer forces and expected to get them back, you'd think they would have gone, but there was nothing that I could find besides rumours and misidentified photos.
It's a funny one because there's a lot of mention and stuff sent purely for evaluation would possibly be in different columns on the logistics stuff, but there's just not enough evidence to say it was actually there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, and like there are photos of saying, oh, this is the Panzer II in Spain, and you look at it and say, no, that's a Panzer I. That's quite obviously a Panzer I.
Britta's got the good news that he'll be old enough by one day when the social media ban on teenagers comes in. So good work. I'm glad you're avoiding it.
All right, World War II, actions of note. Poland, as we were saying before, with 970 Panzer Is still being used as a frontline tank. The 1,100 Panzer IIs still made up the bulk of the invasion force when the nearly 2,700 Panzers went into Poland in 1939. There were more Panzer Is that had been built, but not all were taken. So even by then they realised that, yeah, it's a tank, but do we really want to take all of them? Because that's just going to, who knows what's going to happen then. Then they went into France in May 1940. The Panzer II once again formed the bulk of the armour that invaded France, with 860 vehicles deployed to the 2,500 Panzers invading. Again, fewer tanks than Poland, as more Panzer Is had been removed from the order of battle.
Many of them removed by the Poles.
Yes, but they also took them out because they were getting more Panzer IIIs online, so they were pushing them forward.
Sure.
And Panzer IVs, I should say.
Yeah. But we've often said, any tank is better than no tank, and the Panzer II was just enough of a tank to be a tank, and to fill that role. And then combined with the fact that it all had radios and quite good range compared to a lot of other vehicles, and quite good speed, they were able to do very exciting things.
Yeah. So the static line of anti-tank guns that France spread out as a thin line of defence could not concentrate enough firepower or traverse their guns fast enough for the fast-moving German tanks before they had breached their lines and were racing for the channel.
That's a really interesting point, though, because often there was a lot of theorising in the early 20th century that speed could be a replacement for armour. People thought about this with ground vehicles. They thought about it with warships, with the incredible number of British sailors killed in battle cruisers. And generally it wasn't true, but in this case, the French heavy anti-tank guns that would have moosed one of these Panzer IIs if they'd connected with them, couldn't traverse quickly enough to deal with the speed of the vehicles. So speed actually was armour in this case.
Yeah, as long as you weren't going directly at it, you could... And it's also poor planning by the French of how they were lining their things up. They should be from firing an enfilade position rather than down the line rather than directly forwards. Anyway.
I think Alexander's joined the chat. Good to see you, mate.
Lovely. Barbarossa. Whilst the 900 Panzer IIIs were expected to do a lot of the work during Operation Barbarossa and the invasion of the Soviet Union, the Panzer II still made up a large part of the force, with 740 Panzer IIs out of the 3,400 tanks that started in June 1941. So, but by the end of 1941, the Panzer II was mostly withdrawn from frontline service as a gun tank, replaced with the Panzer III. It would still serve in rear areas and as a recon tank with the Panzer battalions, but was not expected to take on T-34s or KV-1s.
Which is lucky, because there's no way it would have made any difference whatsoever.
No, well, you could get around behind it, and if you had tungsten rounds, would
if you had tungsten rounds, and even firing to the rear of a T-34, let alone a KV, you wouldn't make much. You wouldn't scratch the paint too much.
Models.
Oh no! Here we go. The models.
We're into the models already, because the Panzer II A, B, C, and F, as in the Alfs A, B, and C, were the initial version of the production Panzer II, made up the bulk of the tanks in the invasion of Poland and France. From those experiences, improvements were made to the production tank that became the Alfs F. It was the mass-produced version of the Panzer II with 1,000 built or converted up to its standard. It had the increased 30mm armour on the turret, and hull from the start if it was built or converted.
That's just the whole front, not the whole hull, but
no,
yeah.
the whole front.
So they're starting even with this to move towards what's become the standard, where you just cram the armour on the front along the axis of threat and try and make sure your tank isn't pointing in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Commander's cupola with periscope and the fake driver's vision slit. So if you see any of these tanks around the place in museums, they may have one, they may have two, they may have three what appear to be vision slits on the front of the tank. One of which was a fake one, so that anybody with an anti-tank rifle would be aiming for the wrong spot.
You do wonder how long that was effective, because we know that all armies produced little cards for their troops, with little arrows saying aim at this bit.
But if you've got three different types of tank you're shooting at, and you know that okay, I can.
You're not pulling out the card to consult it in the moment.
I can see a vision slit in all three of them. They've all got vision slits in different spots. Which one? Where am I firing at? Which tank? So if I've got a Panzer III, Panzer IV, and a Panzer II.
Yeah, but you've only got 15 mils of armor on this thing in a lot of cases. So.
Yeah.
It's one of those classic things where the Germans kept protecting their vehicles against their own weapons, not so much against the enemy's weapons. I'm thinking the way Zimmerit was invented to stop magnetic mines that only the Germans had. Yeah.
All right. So the Alps F was in production from March of 1941 through till July of 1942, and mostly saw service on the Eastern Front. The failed Panzer IIs. This was the Alps D and E. In an attempt to improve mobility and reduce the requirement to replace the leaf spring suspension every 2,000 kilometres, Christie suspension was introduced to the Alps D and E with 4 large road wheels, the new suspension along with the new transmission.
Okay, so Alan's asked why the bridge layer looks like it's got Christie suspension. Here you go.
This is exactly why. So they tried them out on the Alps D and E. The new suspension, along with a new transmission, enabled the tank to reach high top speeds of 55 kilometres an hour and was hoped to perform the cavalry role of recon and pursuit.
But they've still got an overloaded commander for recon. But yep.
143 were built and they were used in the invasion of Poland, where it was found that the cross-country mobility suffered too much with the Christie torsion bar suspension.
Christie or torsion bar? I guess they had both, but it wasn't the same in the same tank.
And they were pulled from service in March from 1940. And converted into Flampanzers, which now we'll go on to. So the Flampanzer, so the Alps D and E were converted to flamethrower tanks and given new designations as the Flampanzer II Alps A and B, just to be confusing, and not a Panzer II Alps F, which is a totally different tank. They got the nickname the Flamingo from being a Flampanzer. The tank was armed only with a MG34 in the turret, but also had 2 small flamethrower turrets installed on the front mudguards.
And weirdly, they look a lot like the flamethrowers that were originally planned on the Mouse. In that they're these funny little corner-mounted. Yeah, so at opposite scales of the tank universe, they still were playing around with these rinky corner-mounted flamethrowers. And of course, the Panzer II, Rob, had a really big problem as a flamethrower tank.
Yeah, it's called lack of armour.
Lack of armour, because flamethrowers have tiny ranges in the bigger scheme of modern combat, and teeny tiny ranges, so you've got to rumble very close to use them, and you generally want that in a very heavily armoured vehicle. The Germans' flamethrowers succeeded, putting them on old French Chars. Or Char B1s, but yeah.
They could traverse 180 degrees to the front and down the side of the tank, but with a range of only 35 metres, they could fire 85-second bursts of flame from the 160-litre tank of fuel. With only 3 crew, the commander had the following jobs. Command the tank, fire and load the machine gun, fire the 2 flamethrower turrets.
How did he actuate those, I wonder?
I have no idea. It also had a bank of smoke grenades that could lob forward to provide cover for an advance or a retreat, and they were almost ready for the invasion of France, but were placed in training for Operation Sea Lion and the invasion of the UK. When it didn't go ahead, the 90 Flampanzers were moved to the Eastern Front for Operation Barbarossa. Their weak armour and the need to get into close range made them vulnerable to Soviet anti-tank rifles. And whilst useful in burning out woods and strong points, most were lost, and by November 41, they were withdrawn from the front and converted into Marder II tanks, tank destroyers, with their machine gun turrets made into in-place fortifications. So that's why the Marder II crews are happy, because
they're not in a flamethrower.
Not in the flame tank. All right. Now we get to the Panzer II G. just going to fill up my glass just because this might take a while.
No worries.
Say hello to people.
I think Hans is asking, how does the beer stay cold the whole time? It does have a glycol tube in the middle here that does sterling service, particularly if I remember to put it in the freezer a week before we do the show.
There you go. And he also chills everything down and finds out the dew point. And...
For those who follow us on social media, the picture of the beer tube full of ice, because one thing we've figured out is it's a lot easier to fill if you're not pouring cold beer onto hot plastic. So,
There you go. All right. Panzer II-G, death by committee. Another failed Panzer II was the Alps G, of which somewhere between 12 and 45 were built. It was the first design of the interleaved road wheels, improved suspension, and a bigger engine with a 150 horsepower Maybach engine, getting the 10-ton vehicle up to 67 kilometres per hour. They even trialled a 180 horsepower 8-cylinder diesel engine in it, all applied so that extra armour could be placed on the tank. But the new transmission and steering couldn't handle it, and the design committee kept making changes to fix or improve the tank without actually asking what's actually needed and wanted by the people on the ground.
I saw a really good quote just today of, it was Henry Ford saying, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Which comes out of people don't actually know what they want. But, yeah.
And that was, they made all these changes up until the point the project was cancelled. One vehicle was painted up for the desert but does not appear to have crossed the Mediterranean. Most others were used as training vehicles, but some were deployed to the Eastern Front. There were more turrets than hulls built for the Alps G, so a number of the turrets were then installed in Western Europe as fixed gun emplacements.
But fixed gun emplacements of a 20mm cannon, it doesn't seem like a great gun emplacement, really.
But it's still a gun emplacement. Yeah. It gives some protection to the poor home guard guys that are standing inside of it.
Yeah, the old men. Yeah.
And
the teenage boys.
And the teenage boys. The Alps H and the Alps M suffered the same fate as competing designs to the G, with only one prototype hull being built. Death by committee, those ones. The Panzer II-J Pocket Heavy, from the man who wanted the E100, the E75, the E50, the E25, and the E10, Heinrich Niepkamp. He said, let's make a super heavy light tank. Actually, he was more thinking about the suspension to be able to put more armour on things, and so that's why he's the one who came up with interleaved road wheels and the compatibility between the various types of tanks, so parts commonality from a heavy to a light, so that you can say, yep, I need these wheels, and these wheels fit on any tank that you want to throw them on.
Jonas is asking if those turrets were part of the Atlantic Wall. I believe so. The Germans had a reasonably rational view that if they couldn't stop the landings and stop a beachhead being formed, they were in trouble. So everything was very heavily to the front, which did open it up to naval bombardment. But
yeah. A pocket heavy with 80 millimetres of frontal armour, 50 millimetres on the sides, and weighing 18 tonnes. Only 31 kilometres an hour top speed.
That's pretty good for a tank with 80 millimetres of front armour.
Too heavy and slow for recon, and got stuck in the Eastern Front mud and swamps, even with a slightly larger 150 horsepower engine. The first prototype came out in November 1939, and 100 were ordered, but they did not start coming out of the factory until 1943. By when its time and usefulness had passed, and the project had already been cancelled in 1942. Still only had the 20mm gun, so no good versus Soviet armour. But it wasn't supposed to take on enemy tanks. It was a heavy recon tank.
Which is an idea that no one's really ever asked for, is it?
No. The idea was that it would recon forward, and if it ran into trouble, like a T-34, then it could pop smoke and get out of there using its armour to survive. Only 22 were built. It had overlapping road wheels to spread out the weight, but didn't do enough to save its mobility. I'm told it's a good low-tier seal clubbing tank in World of Tanks, as you don't expect to come up against that much armour, but I can't remember it much myself. I'd much rather the Matilda.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Alan's asking us, we're not watching Fisk, do we have an HD Ford Ranger truck? Look, many of my neighbours have enormous Ford Rangers. I have so far resisted the temptation to let their tyres down at night.
The Ford Ranger is taking over the Australian roads, and one day they will get theirs.
Well, it's largely a failure of tax policy is been driving that. But anyway, let's keep talking about tanks.
Yep.
Oh, and while Bill's noted the J would have been a more sensible Flampanzer, that's a very good point.
Very good point. That's well said. Gold stars, that man. Panzer II Luch, or Lynx, in September of 1939.
I think it's pronounced like Luke. But anyway, you can just go with what you want.
In Strine, I can pronounce it however I feel like it. Right?
Look, you've mastered elegance, so you can do anything.
Phaser. In September of 1939, after the invasion of Poland, Germany determined that they needed a fully tracked recon vehicle, as the wheeled recon vehicles they had up to that point were not good enough. And so the Panzer II Ausf L was developed, which became known as the Luch. Luke Skywalker, I don't know. It was to have a crew of 4, finally, with the radio operator being essential for a recon vehicle. It was to come with the interleaved road wheels and wider tracks for greater mobility. It's a good-looking little tank with a redesigned turret and extra armor, and having the main gun mounted centrally, which makes it much more aesthetically pleasing to my eye. An order for 800 was made to the Nuremberg factory in 1942, with 700 of them to have the 50mm gun. But the mustachioed one says the priority for that factory was to be the Panther, and so the Lux was dropped down the list, and only 100 were built, all with the 20mm gun.
I think the German corporal might have had a good point. It always just comes back to the issue that the Germans were starting to do the math. They weren't very good at it, but they were starting to do the math on how much fuel they needed to run the operations they wanted to run, and a bigger, better tank was a better use of fuel than lots of smaller tanks.
But it's so much fun to drive.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other thing.
All right, the Lux entered service with the Armoured Reconnaissance Forces with 4 platoons of 7 tanks and one in the company headquarters in the autumn of 1942 in the 4th Panzer Division on the Eastern Front. They took part in Operation Citadel, which is the Battle of Kursk, after which from the 29 deployed, only 10 were left.
I mean, those 10 did pretty well not to get smashed in that meat grinder in that.
At least they didn't catch on fire.
Coming off the transporters, yeah.
Unlike the Panthers, right? Yeah. With the defeat at Kursk, there was less need for recon.
It was a draw. No, I'm joking.
There was less need for a recon being on the defensive, and the recon element was disbanded, and the remaining tanks sent back to Nuremberg factory for repair. It's also why they didn't bother with the 50mm gun version, as by this stage of the war, you want at least a 75mm gun. The last Lux came out of production in February of 1944, the last gun tank version of the Panzer II. So just remember that. There was still a gun tank version. They would be redeployed in the 9th Panzer Division in March of 1944 and fight in Normandy during the campaign of June 44. The remaining tanks were distributed. Those that didn't go to the 9th Division were distributed individually to other units. So basically said, you need a recon tank, here you go. They also thought about making an armoured recovery, an anti-tank flak version of the Lux.
So anti-aircraft flak version.
Anti-aircraft, sorry. What did I say? Whatever.
Again, they kept having these ideas of, what can we do with this small chassis? And it's like, don't do anything. Your small chassis is no good. You want bigger chassis. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, but it's fun. It looks good. It's a fun tank. The wider tracks make so much difference in games and so forth. Anyway, then we get on to the Leopard VK16.02. That was designed to replace the Lux and was in design from mid-1941 through to January 1943, with the intent to go into production from April 1943. But the project was cancelled before even a prototype was built, as did not meet the requirements for a tank of 1944.
I just love that there were fit young men in this design bureau coming up with ever more refinements on the Panzer II chassis, and being like, just keep drawing. As long as we're drawing stuff, they're not sending us to the Eastern Front.
All right, 22 tons, 550 horsepower engine, 50mm gun, 50 mils of armour and able to travel 550 kilometres at 45 kilometres an hour with good mobility and fitting in all the improvements that couldn't get into Lux. That's a pretty good thing if you want to be running around it. So it was just an improvement. And look, we won't go into the Skoda T15, which, whilst very similar to the Panzer II and sometimes called the Panzer II Skoda, it's a different tank.
Yeah, if it's coming out of the Skoda works, it ain't a PZ2.
Yeah. Variant.
Here we go, the Marder II. Everyone's happy. The happiest tank in World War II.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, just like in terms of the photos all uniformly being happy dudes in well-pressed uniforms, there was something going on with the Marder IIs.
There you go. 680 built, 180 were converted to Marder IIs, and we had some fun with the naming of the Panzer II, but the Marder, which is a marten, which is a type of weasel, had its own story. As well.
Germans like calling tanks after weasels. I mean, weasels are Great little animals too, but yeah. And vicious.
It was named by the little corporal himself in November of 1943, as the official designation kept changing and went along the lines of 7.62 centimetre Pack 36 brackets R, lowercase r, ALF, not an ALFs, an ALF, FGST dot PK, PZKPFW dot L11 brackets,
Capital F.
Capital F, brackets, SFL, lowercase dot, close brackets. And that was the first of 3 names in 6 months from April of 1942.
I can imagine people in high command and, getting into the Chancellor's office being like, what is this thing? Why are we just looking at these strings of letters and numbers? Like, oh, it's a Marder. Okay. It's a Marder too. It was funny though, because they had the Soviet 76 point, was it 76.2?
Yep.
And
which is why you have the lowercase r in that string of letters.
Because it's a Russian
conversion.
It's a Russian gun in this, and then they were like, actually, we can put German guns in these. But you can imagine when you're dealing with the colossal amounts of material that has been captured in Barbarossa, you're like, should we do something with all this stuff?
We could make another, put it into a gun emplacement on the western coast.
Now, Britt has asked, were the Wesp and Marder II the same except for the gun? No, radically different. The Marder II was designed as a tank destroyer, so horizontal fire, and the Wesp was an artillery piece, so high-angled fire.
Yep. All right, so that was one of the names in the of the 3 names in the first 6 months, with another name coming along similar to that in 1943 and another in 1944. So that's why the little corporal came along and said, yeah, you know what, we're going to call this one the Marder.
Yep.
The first one's converted from the failed Flampanzers. They used 150 captured Soviet 76.2 millimeter guns. They captured so many of them in 1941 that they wanted to use them for something, which were rechambered to the German 75 millimeter rounds. They only carried 37 rounds, which was not enough for a tank destroyer, as it was estimated it could take up to 6 shots to destroy a tank. Mostly deployed on the Eastern Front. Later vehicles would be armed with a German Pack 40 75 millimeter gun. Like doctrine for most tank destroyers, they would be positioned on the flank of an attack to protect them, or set up for ambush on defence. They would go forward as part of a counterattack to hold the objective, only until other dedicated forces arrived, when they would leave the position. But it was never to be used instead of a Stug or a tank. So as an open-topped vehicle, they were vulnerable to weather and artillery. After firing the gun, the radio operator would have to check the valves in the radio, which could be dislodged due to the power of the gun blast in the open fighting compartment. That's
just an interesting problem to have when you've massively upgunned a vehicle.
Yep. You've got an enclosed fighting compartment, but not a roof on it. But basically, all the backblast is still coming into your little area. Yeah. And if your radio, which was in that fighting compartment rather than down in the hull, where it had been in the Panzer II, it was on the side of the compartment. It could get dislodged and so forth, and your valves and your crystals and whatever else they used.
But it's something that in this era, when we've got little radios in our pockets, talking about mobile phones, that can talk to any other device anywhere in the world.
But you drop them.
But you've got to remember as well, though, that in the 1930s, American police cars with Packard 6-cylinder engines in them had to redline the engine to operate the radio. Because the power usage with when you're using valves to run your radios was colossal. So a radio was a very different beast than to what we live with today.
And Britt was saying, no, look, the superstructure, no, they're very different, because the Wesp, the engine was moved forward, and the driver and transmission was moved forward, whereas the Marder, basically they just put it the fighting compartment on top. It was different. Anyway,
but having a high-angle gun requires a totally different mounting and a totally different turret. So they were significantly different. It's the point we're trying to make.
Right. Yeah. The gun had the following traverse: 5 degrees down, 16 degrees elevation, 25 degrees left and right. Very limited armour. Not all had muzzle brakes, so you'll see some with, some without. Some had periscopes for the gunner, as well as a gun sight to enable the crew to have greater visibility for identifying targets without having to stick their heads up over the top of their very limited gun shields. Neither the front and rear travel lock when moving, and the front one had to be disengaged by the crew climbing out the front. which is no good under fire. It's very tall, making it a very large target that required for very good cover positioning very good positioning for cover from anti-tank fire and concealment for ambush. So it was a
look. It was high. It was a high Panzer II, but the Panzer II was such a low vehicle to begin with. The stuff wasn't insurmountable, particularly when you're setting up in prepared positions. It wasn't designed to be, charging across the plain at Kursk. So, that in theory, you have got time to dig it in and cover it with foliage. All right, Rob, we've done the Marder too, so let's talk about the Wesp.
The Wesp. Like the Marder, the Wesp, which stands for Wasp, went through a bunch of names until it became known as the Wesp. But even that was unofficial, as the mustachioed one hadn't thought of it himself, so he said not to call it that, but everyone did. There was a need for artillery to keep up with the motorised and mechanised forces, with towed artillery, which could not be achieved by horse and truck-drawn artillery, because remember, the Germans still had a lot of horse-drawn artillery.
Enormous use of horses, yeah.
Towed artillery could not redeploy quick enough, advance, run away, or quickly turn to cover somewhere else. This issue was known after Poland in 1939, but they didn't do anything about it until 1942. And even that, an interim solution was provided rather than a dedicated approach. Industry couldn't keep up with tank production, and so there were no spare capacity for self-propelled guns. Plus, they said they could rely on the Air Force until they couldn't.
Yeah, every military operation since Air Forces were invented has been like, we're relying on the Air Force, and then and
then they don't turn up for the Queen's first.
Here in Canberra, when the Queen died, there was meant to be a fly past, but there was rain somewhere, so they just decided not to turn up. But, you go back to the Hood and the Prince of Wales off the coast of Malaya, hoping that there'd be air cover that wasn't there. You go back to relying on air cover turning up is unpleasant. Yeah.
And the solution they wanted was a 360-degree firing capability and the ability to remove the gun for use as emplaced artillery. But eventually they realised that those requirements were too hard and not very practical, and so they built the Wesp instead. The standard German field artillery pieces at the time were a 105mm gun and a 150mm gun. The chassis of the Panzer II could fit the 105mm gun, whilst the 150mm gun went into the Panzer IV chassis and became the Hummel, which means bumblebee.
I've got to say, when I've been at points in my life where I had time for these things, playing war games with lots and lots of cardboard tokens, a Wesp on the right hilltop is you want it on the reverse slope of the hilltop? Yeah. Well, it's near the hilltop, but it can be a battle-changing weapon because it can get to interesting places because it's light enough and its gun's big enough. But yeah.
They didn't like hills, though. Anyway,
so Alan's asked an interesting question. Are there any records of the Stuarts versus the Panzer II? And I'm not aware of it, but that's not to say it couldn't. It could have happened in North Africa, possibly. But I think the Panzer II's 20mm would have been enough to stuff up a Stuart, so it would have been an interesting matchup. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And look, I think we talked about in the Stuart episode that the Stuart's big failing of not having enough of a fuel tank. It could outrace things, but it
couldn't do it very long.
Couldn't do it very long, and so the Panzer IIs would just be able to keep on going, and as long as it didn't get caught, it'd outdistance the Stuarts. Right, the Wesp was produced from February 1943 through till July 1944. It only carried 32 rounds, which again is not very much for an artillery vehicle, self-propelled gun. With its tall superstructure, it was very top-heavy. It was found to be good for the Eastern Front, where the extra height and visibility was not an issue for an artillery piece, unlike a tank or a tank destroyer, but it was not great for the mountains of Italy, where traversing across a hillside was a very dubious proposition.
As it threatened to topple over at any moment.
That would end up with your Wesp crashing down the side of a valley.
In any vehicle, you should not traverse sideways across hills. It is asking for a bad afternoon.
But, when you see the tanks in front of you doing it and then you're told to do it and you say, well, my vehicle is a lot more top-heavy than theirs.
Yeah, as someone who had uncles who were farmers and rode quad bikes, the thing that got drummed into my head as a 12-year-old was don't ever go sideways on a hill because you will die.
Yeah, they will roll over and kill you. Yeah, anyway, it had 5 crew as standard, but many of them would have 6 men. and being such a small chassis, it really limited the gear they could take with them. They built 680 gun vehicles and 160 ammo carriers. So
I feel like they needed 680 ammo carriers for 680 gun vehicles, but there we go.
So a fifth of the fleet was taken up carrying ammo. So the ammo carriers could carry 90 rounds rather than being a gun tank. But the gun could be removed and placed in an ammo carrier. So they did have that sort of flexibility. It had a 17 degrees left and right traverse for 34 total. The engine was moved forward and behind the driver. The 105mm gun had a range of 10 kilometres with a 42-degree max elevation and minus 5 degrees depression.
I'd love to know what sort of day they had to elevate to -5 with this howitzer, but yeah. Yeah.
Who knows? It weighed 11 tonnes. And
things aren't going to plan when you're pointing down that far, that's all I'm saying.
Well, you're on the reverse slope of a hill. You're
sure.
Taking out the baddies from there. All right, it weighed 11 tonnes and go 40 kilometres an hour on road, 30 kilometres an hour off-road with the same 140 horsepower engine as the Panzer II. 280 litres of fuel for 220 kilometres or 140 kilometres cross-country. To deal with the extra weight, the leaf spring suspension was widened from 80mm to 98mm, and some vehicles had vertical volute springs added to increase the suspension. A battery was 6 artillery vehicles and 2 ammo carriers. They performed well on the Eastern Front. Their reliability and range meant they mostly survived.
There we go, mostly.
Yeah. All right.
But I mean, when you've got a 10-kilometre range and you're calling in artillery missions, you really shouldn't. Like your team's having a very bad day when you're taking fire directly.
That's the point, is that that's why I think they probably had a happier cruise than the Marder IIs, which actually had to be up to fighting.
The pictures of the Marder IIs, they all look very happy. The Wesps, they just look like, average Germans. But
there you go.
Yeah.
Swimming tanks, the Panzer II with Schwimmkörper, a sealed Panzer II with 2 pontoons to allow it to float. They were prepared for Operation Sea Lion, but returned to normal service afterwards.
Yeah, this was this whole idea. Well, we'll just we'll just float across the English Channel. There was this idea the Germans had that basically the Channel crossing was just a slightly more complicated river crossing. And to the extent that in World War I, the Germans have been doing amphibious operations in the Baltic against the Russians with great success and ease compared to the heavy weather the British had made at Gallipoli. You could see why they thought that way, but obviously, everyone who's ever wargamed Operation Sea Lion since has been like, "Hey, you guys were going to lose badly." Yeah, the war would have ended in 1942 if they'd attempted Operation Sea Lion.
They didn't need a divine wind to sink the Khan's fleet. It was just the case of the North Sea would do it for them.
Well, but yeah, that and the Royal Navy let loose on the invasion fleet. But yeah.
All right. With a reliable chassis and engine and no longer effective on the front, the number of hulls were converted into bridge layers, ammo carriers, and gun tractors. Legacy. Well, here we go. Okay. My thoughts. All right. It was the bulk of success in a light tank. For a tank that was only an interim solution whilst waiting for the Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs, they achieved a great deal of early war success. Germany was able to build enough of them, and they were just good enough to perform the role that was assigned them against the opponents in front of them. Now, that's the important part, the opponents in front of them. Fast enough to evade the static anti-tank guns, and all had radios for good communications. They were reliable and manoeuvrable enough and in enough numbers to win in Poland and France. They achieved enough in Russia for the Nazis to get into trouble. And let's stop and think about this for a sec. If Barbarossa had fizzled out in Ukraine/Belarus, what would have happened? Would the Soviets have counterattacked too early and then been too weak against the fascists with shorter supply lines who are not fighting in winter? Who knows? I wonder if anyone has written an alternate history novel based upon that premise. There you go. If anybody wants to do it,
sure, go for it.
Yeah. I don't know what Newt Gingrich is doing these days.
Send us a link. But, didn't he die the other day? Anyway.
No, that was... anyways, back to the Panzer II. After all those early wins, after the tank was no longer suitable for frontline service, there were enough of them, and the chassis was good enough that they could be converted into vehicles that were still useful to carry out anti-partisan activities or used as training vehicles. They were deployed in all theatres of the German army. Not a great tank, not a special tank, but a tank that there were enough of them and they were just good enough to get the job done.
Just enough of a tank. And also, when you think that, they were like, oh, well, this is interim until we get Panzer III and IV, but Panzer III and IV fundamentally became the interim tanks before the Panther and Tiger II. And Panzer II was there in large numbers for the winning bits. So it's just funny how your interims tend to become the things that do the work. But yeah.
All right. Playing World of Tanks, and it's been a little while. I'm very partial to getting a platoon of light tanks, especially the Leopard and Luch, and running and gunning at speed, circle strafing the slow or no turret vehicles, and then running away to hide as your clip reloaded for over 30 seconds.
But I as a really bad World of Tanks player, I hate facing a Panzer II. They just go dakka, 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 and you just get confused, and it's terrible.
One of those shots are bouncing, but everyone's, if they can get it behind.
Look, when I play World of Tanks, my rounds do nothing to the enemy, and theirs smash me.
Yeah. It's the fun of watching their turret trying to traverse around, and while you're circling around the tank.
Dakka, dakka, dakka,
I'm going faster than your turret. No. All the while trying not to drive off a cliff, run into a wall, or worse yet, accidentally ram your target, because as soon as you do that, you blow up.
You blow up.
Some games are awesome and you make a difference, but most are over quickly and you get to jump into another battle and try something else. Then we have...
tell us the Girls and Panzer report,
Girls and Panzer. There are many instances of the Panzer II being used by the teams in Girls and Panzer as a common early war tank. But strangely, none of the Lukes, which existed, or the Leopard, which didn't. The Marder II and Wesp don't appear, as Girls and Panzer don't use tank destroyers or self-propelled artillery in their battles. On the one instance of the Lukes was as a name of a convenience store in the background of a battle. So they know it exists, they just didn't want to roll it out.
I suspect the Girls and Panzer people know a lot about tanks. But
I do. All right, the poll.
So a misguided stopgap has really made a comeback. It's up to 27%, and all the tank they needed is running at 73%. So there we go.
There you go. And from that, folks, we'll disappear and let you listen to our chat with our friend Graham.
Yeah. So Graham, who's been on the show before, he rebuilt a Stuart and then got a job at the Cairns Tank Museum. But now he's returned because he has a young daughter, and his wife said, "Get home."
He just wanted to spend time with his family.
Well, yes, exactly.
But the Tank Museum has now put out an
ad. I shared it. Yes.
Yeah, call for anybody who would like to work in the Tank Museum as a mechanic. Essentially, we're assuming to replace Graham.
But anyway, if you've got a diesel certificate or a mechanic's credential, then there is a job going if you love tanks. So. I'm not saying every one of us is qualified or capable or motivated, but there might be someone. But, okay, so we're going to have this chat with Graham, and then we will be back in the second half. We have quite a lot to talk about. Okay, folks, enjoy. Okay, folks, so it's our very great pleasure here at Totally Tank to be joined once again by Graham, aka XA Coupe Guy, who has spent a year with the tanks at the Australian Museum of Armour and Artillery and is now a free man to pursue his social media dreams now that he has returned to his family. Graham, welcome back to the show.
Yes, good to be here.
Now, I guess the first question I've got, and I know Rob's got a bunch of questions, is, so you spent a year maintaining a whole bunch of tanks, driving a whole bunch of tanks, and can you tell us which one you hated the most and which one you loved the most?
Oh, that's a long list. Favourite, straight off the bat, is the Leopard 1.
Because it's so easy to maintain, or is it just
amazing to drive, easy to drive, easy to work on? It's just, they nailed it with that vehicle. The T70
so the Mercedes-Benz of tanks.
Favorite. What was that?
Excellent. And which one did you hate the most?
Oh, there is so many. Well, I wasn't fond of the.
Now, speaking of the dangers of a workshop, you mentioned one of your latest videos about the singing habits of your fellows in Cairns there. Did you ever join in? And if so,
I
what
don't
was
have
what?
a singing voice at
Neither do
all.
I. That doesn't stop me joining.
Oh, everyone always did that. I wish I filmed it because I was working on the T72 just after I'd done the engine priming pump, and I was running it up, and it was sort of poked out the doorway to, stop the exhaust gases and stuff. And I just happened to glance up, and that Pink Pony Club was on the radio, and Daryl was working on the Wesp, and he was singing it to his heart's content. It was the funniest thing I ever saw in my life.
I mean, Shovel Roan's pretty awesome, but I'm
Pony Club is a
interested the old
crowd
boys
favourite.
are so up with their contemporary pop music.
I couldn't believe how much Daryl loved it. He actually put it on. And one morning I remember walking in, and Bo and Jess, because we started at 6, and they were cranking Barbie Girl at full volume.
Well, it's good fun.
I can't emphasize how good it was. Like, those two guys are just nicer than you'll ever know, and they're super, super intelligent and just genuine, just nice. You just can't beat them.
Yeah. And so, do you think you'll head back up to help out with Armourfest next year or any future years?
Well, if I get an invite, I'll go back up. I won't be doing the big long stints before because I've got a life down here nowadays.
Mm.
But help out a couple of times if I get the invite, because there's loads and loads. Like, the amount of people who want to volunteer is just endless. You're just like, oh my God, really?
Right. And okay, and now that you've settled back in Adelaide, have you returned to a normal getting up time in the morning, or are you still getting up at 5 o'clock, or is your household a bit later a riser?
I try to be operating about 9 nowadays. I had to get up at 5:30. I realised that 5:30 in the morning at Cairns was like 5 o'clock for everyone else. That's the time you got up to go to work. You're just like, oh my God. But you did get to finish super early, so you're like 2:30 in the afternoon. It's like half a day back.
Yeah.
Now, for our international audience, that's mostly to beat the heat of the day, yeah?
Oh, you don't want to be there in summer. Mm-mm. Like, you got to remember that Cairns is very tropical. It is like humidity all the time. It never stops. It's just like when Armourfest is on, that's when the weather's probably the least humid ever. But summer, like the wet season there, is the most unpleasant place to be ever.
I'm assuming the wet season coming up was one of the reasons that you thought, I'm going to head back to Adelaide.
Oh no, it was
No?
the quarter, but yeah, I was like, oh, at least I got out before it kicked off.
And with with your XA Coupe channel, now, did you have to go out and buy yourself another XA Coupe so that you didn't have to rethink the channel name?
No, but I happened to end up with one.
I know. I saw. That's what I'm saying.
I accidentally bought another Falcon the other day. It was meant to be the parts car for that coupe, but it turned out to be kind of special in its own right. Sort of landed on my feet with that one. I was like, whoops.
And then there's the Stingray, the yellow Corvette Stingray, and you just got to say,
I'm trying to get rid of that one because I want to fund some other things.
But you've only just got it, so you got to have some fun in it first,
I've
don't
had some
you?
fun with it, but like it's the kind of car that the way it looks and it's leery and it's loud, and you always want to put your foot into it. It's going to get you in trouble. Or at least me, I've got a very lead-weighted foot.
And the left-hand drive must make things a bit.
That's easy.
That's easy.
Yeah.
John,
is that the old fiberglass hull?
Yeah, they're a fiberglass car on a steel chassis.
Yeah, right.
I saw your video on it I saw your video on the other day, and I saw the exhaust the pipes going down the side beside the driver's door, and I'm thinking that'll burn the back of your calves or something, or is it pretty safe?
Well, after a long drive, you want to do a bit of a hop as you get out. You want to get over them. I don't know what the legalities of side pipes are, but I know on that car they function.
with all the work you seem to be doing, you seem to already have 5 cars on the go since you've been back from Cairns. Your work rate and output has just seemed so incredible, and you just seem to know exactly what you're going to do with each car as you're doing your videos. And it's just, I just want to say, it's really admirable to just watch you going through them. It's going. I wouldn't know where to start with any of those sort of things. It's a case of you going from one to the next and saying, "Oh, I'm going to strip the paint off this and get the rust off that, and then I'm going to do this on this car," and it's just, yeah, amazing. And then seeing the yellow Corvette is really nice.
I don't know. I've this is what I was doing before I went to Cairns. I've just sort of got used to being able to do all this, and I know these Falcons inside out and upside down. I just know what I'm doing. I just don't even have to think.
And with the Stingray
Yeah, it's nothing
purchase,
like actually.
was it just an opportunity, or
I didn't actually
Go, Rob.
expect to buy a Falcon hardtop again because they were so unbelievably expensive. I thought, oh well, right place, right time. I thought maybe. It's a cool car. I mean, I had the
it
Jeep,
is?
I had a Willys Jeep before that. It's actually, you watch Lottie the Tank Whisperer. She's actually doing up the Jeep that I owned briefly.
Oh, okay.
So like I
It's
had
a
it.
small world.
Well, the Jeeps aren't. Well, it Cairns. Where are we going to get another one? So I'd bought the Jeep from the guy I sold my tank to, and then it just didn't. The ducks didn't line up, so I went all right, and then I sold it back to him, and then he sold it to them, and then sold it to a client of theirs, and then they're restoring it. But it's funny how the Jeep just keeps moving around.
Now, we're interested in your car restorations, but for us and our fans, the tanks are where it's at. Have you got your eye on anything? Is there a dream tank you'd like to do up that might be, I'm not saying it's out there, but on the horizon?
I've got. You never lose your tank contacts, so I've got a few leads on a few vehicles. I don't know if I'd want to do a Stewart again, but the problem you get when you start moving up from that is you got the Grant and Lee territory, and they're starting to get pretty damn heavy, and you need a pretty big workshop to be able to work on them. So I sort of like, I think we'll just. I mean, I can get myself a Grant lower hull. The next thing I was gonna do, tank related, when my ducks line up, was to get a Grant lower hull and convert it into a Sherman.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, it was the lower half of the Grant and the Sherman is pretty much the same thing. So
yeah, the Sherman's welded, the Grant is riveted, but the suspension units are the same, and you can fill that little gap in on the left-hand side when you're staring at the front of it to make it look like a Sherman. That's about the only real. I mean, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of all the steering linkages and the brakes and all that, they're all totally different. But externally, for like they call it a visual mod, where you convert one into it, that's pretty easy to do.
would you want to do
Yeah,
that
you
to a
need.
historic vehicle? I'd imagine there'd be some purists getting pretty angry.
Well, I owned a incredibly rare Stuart that had combat history with Australia and Papua New Guinea, and what I found is only the keyboard warriors care about the provenance. The people who
Yeah.
actually have them don't give a flying F. History doesn't mean anything to the people who can afford them. That's the people. They're only the people who like research them. They tend to never be able to own them. So, and I don't know why they seem to care more than others. But when it's down to the nitty gritties of it, and you're actually getting the vehicle, the history doesn't mean anything. It's a bit of a
I
sad
mean, there
thing.
was a scandal. Yeah, there was a scandal last year that a tank that had been landed on D-Day on day one as an engineering vehicle, its owner had converted it back into a gun tank because gun tanks are cooler. And, obviously the fuss has passed over on that. But I don't know. Okay. Yeah, if you own it, it's yours and you can do what you want. That's where we're at, really.
Well, it's your tank. Do what you like with it.
Hmm.
Oh, the
Fair
history.
enough.
And
Yeah,
so I guess,
go, Rob. Sorry.
yeah, I'm guessing needing a bigger workshop will be what decides what you need to work on next, whether or not you actually get into the idea of being able to pick up another tank or anything like that.
Well, if you get a Stuart, you don't really need a massive workshop. I built my last one in a standard workshop. That wasn't too bad. But yeah, no, really, even a Grant, you don't need a massive workshop. They're not that big. They're just really tall. Actually, when I was working on the Firefly at Cairns, that's the last job I was doing, which was converting the fan setup from what it was to running 434 hydraulic fans. One thing I was stunned by was how tall the Firefly was. Like, just when I know I'm short, but when I just look up at it, you're like, that's actually a very tall vehicle. And then you look at my scale models and like, the tank to like people scale, there's something wrong with them because they're not that short. They're very tall. I think between a Grant and a Sherman or a Lee and a Sherman, there's only 4 inches of height difference.
Yeah, I certainly because I got a chance to ride the Firefly at this.
He was the one driving us around.
And
I was the driver.
He was the driver, John.
That was Graham driving us around. Yes,
yes.
But yeah, it was extremely tall, being up the top of that thing. Yeah, much taller even than the Panther, which is not a small tank. Yeah.
Like people think, oh, it's good, but the only real difference between the Grant and the Sherman was the gun was in the turret. That's about it. The vehicles are virtually the same. If you wanted to really get down to the nitty gritties, like the engine decks are the same. I think I had the Sherman and a Grant next to each other in the workshop, and I had an angle gauge, and I was working out that the rear sponsons that slope up are exactly the same angle. You could, if you got a lower hull of a Grant that still had the rear sponsons on it, and the engine deck area, you could just continue that up the front and make the Sherman without any effort. They're eerily similar.
Yeah, I mean, it was the American idea, which worked out pretty well for them in the end, of just building on the M2, built into the M3, built into the M4, and at every stage where they locked it off, it was extremely well done.
Well, they by the time they got the Sherman, they'd had the Lee and the Grant for quite a while. I mean, not really in the scheme of things. A lot of tank development in a very short period of time was World War II. But they fine-tuned all the mechanical bugs out of them by the time they got the Sherman. That's why they were so reliable. And those radial engines, the 965s, they're unbelievably good.
I guess I'm curious with now that you've spent a lot of time with a lot of different tanks. Have you got any takeaways on what makes the good ones or the bad ones from at the point of view of someone who's swung spanners on them?
Like, none of them are easy to work on. Like, I've done the Panzer IV-D and doing the fuel pump on that and things like that, where they're buried under a whole bunch of stuff. They're just unfun to work on. And then you work on a Sherman, and that's not the funnest thing because you can't stand on the back of it. The T-72, everything's buried under everything, and you try and say the oil priming pump, that you only get a hole about this big to get everything out of. That, or you're removing the engine. But like the Leopard 1, by that time, they've put a lot of effort into developing an easy way to do things quickly. But that being said, like a Sherman or something with a radial, there isn't hardly any accessories to undo, and you have the motor out in no time at all. Like, it's all about pack changes, I think.
Sorry, about what?
Like pack changes. You don't fix them, you just pull the engine, put another one in.
Take the power pack out and put another one in and get that down to as short a time as you can.
You want to get the vehicle up and running as quickly as possible, so don't even bother trying to fix it.
Yeah, and then the engine can go back to a depot for an overhaul, and fair enough. That is a great insight. Thank you.
They're all just different to work on. I don't know. The tanks to work on are just bigger cars almost. It's people go, how do you know what to work on? Well, actually, it all just follows the same principles. There's like the diesel engines, they're just truck engines almost, or aircraft engines, things like that. It's all similar principles. I didn't find it hard to work on at all, really. Just everything's really, really heavy.
Did the German tanks with the Zeppelin heritage on those Maybach engines have anything significantly different from the aircraft or train engines that the other old ones had?
Not really. I thought the motors were quite easy to work on, but getting to them sucks. But yeah,
How often did you have to pull the turrets?
we never pulled a turret ever.
Yeah, right.
You just turn them.
Yeah, right.
They're designed to be in a certain spot when you want to take something out. Basically, it's a pain in the rear end if you say the Firefly or something. Because it had that huge bustle hanging off the back of it because you got to turn the turret all the way to like 90 degrees to be able to get it. Whereas on some of them you can just turn it a little bit. Like that T-72, that was a pain because its turret only sat in one spot, and because none of the vehicles there have powered turrets. I don't think we ever powered any of them up to make them hydraulically traverse. It's just well, whining and whining and whining and whining and whining. It just take forever.
Not even the Leopard or the Gepard?
Uh, the only vehicle that I know that the turret works on is the M48. But nobody knows how to turn it on.
You just drive the thing. You don't know how to drive. You don't know how to command the turret.
I can drive that, no worries. Yeah. But I don't know how to turn the turret on. The person with all of the knowledge is Jason. He knows how to do. He's got more tank driving knowledge than anyone there.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to me that I mean, because we go to tank festival as well. We go to one tank festival a couple of times. And so we get to experience the tanks from actually riding in them, which is significantly greater experience than not riding in a tank. And you've had the experience of driving a lot of the tanks, which is a greater step of knowledge up from that and maintaining them. But then there's all the stuff that festivals and tank museums don't do, which is fighting the turret and firing the guns. And that's kind of like a whole level with these historic vehicles that we're all just guessing at, I guess.
I think when they first started doing Armour Fest, they did reenactments and things like that, but it slowly geared itself towards making money. So that's why it sort of scaled down to just giving rides. And I don't know anywhere you could go and pay, I don't know what it was to ride in the T-72, but it wasn't a lot of money. And where do you go in the world to go ride a T-72? And as long as
I'm told that the Canadian tank festival at Oshawa, Okino, does sell rides as well, but it's very limited. Yeah, and our good friend at the show, Alan, will point out that you can go to Las Vegas and they've got a bunch of tanks there you can pay to ride in, but it's still a limited experience.
Yeah, there's not many places.
I know the Kino ones, they also do reenactments, so if you're lucky enough to be part of the crew, they'll be manning the turret and firing the guns and so forth. But as you're saying, John, you can probably also do that in Florida, Texas, or Vegas. There'll be various places around there that that'll allow you to fire them.
I might not go to Armour Fest next year. I was invited to go to Market Harbour with some of the Pommy fellas. If I get myself over to England, Adrian Barrell said he'd show me around, and the twins. I got along with the Pommy fellas really, really well.
Nick and Phil were lovely. They did an interview for us while we were up there the other week.
Yeah, Adrian Barrell is the guy who built the Cromwell with Carl Brown.
Oh, yeah.
He's a wealth of knowledge, that man. And he's funny. He's actually hilarious to talk to.
Well, if you do make it to the Northern Hemisphere tank festivals, we would love to hear you what you got to say on them. Rob, you got any other questions?
No, I think I've said all we need to say. But look, enjoying your XA Coupe channel again, and look, good luck with it.
Yeah.
All right, Graham, and hopefully we can catch up around some tanks before too long. Thank you very much.
I've still got my contacts out there. I got a good mate down in Ballarat. He's got a left, no, hello, blah, blah. He's got a Centurion R, one of the few that are actually running and driving. He's got one. He barrels around it periodically.
Nice one. All right, thank you.
No worries.
And we're back. Thank you very much, folks. I hope you enjoyed that chat with Graham. There are a few eye-popping moments. You might notice there was one that was so eye-popping we had to take it out, but that's okay. All right, we want to quickly thank our patrons. And actually, before we do that, Rob, our patrons have paid for something. And I'm surprising you now.
Oh, you are? Oh, my goodness. What is... Oh, it's a Russian tank helmet.
It's Russian tank helmets, yeah.
For both of us?
For both of us, yeah. Ordered from an army surplus store. The one thing
I've got to say, the thing I really want to do now is invade a neighbouring country.
Yeah. So the one thing I've learned is you can't wear glasses with them. And I think, I don't know if your head's bigger than mine, but this one might need to be, I might need the bigger one, which I think you've got there. But,
what do you say?
The biggest thing is this thing that dangles like a spinal cord off your back for the comms plug. Yeah,
the comms plug. Yeah,
it's yes.
And I'm assuming that's your throat mic in there.
That's the throat mic there. Yeah.
Look at that, boys and girls. I can bang my head on the inside of a tank and not feel it.
Look, I will say the padding is substantial. Like you do it once you've got them on, squeezed over your head. You do feel like you can start banging your head against things without too much trouble.
Oh, yeah, that's a good tanky smell.
Smells like sweaty Russians. Yep.
Good.
So thank you so much to our patrons for funding Rob to have an early Christmas present of a Russian tanker's helmet.
22G33. There you go. Yes.
Yes. Anyway.
Now I should just buy a Russian tank to plug it into.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Jonas has asked, are they comfortable? And they are, on my size head, extremely tight. Remember that Russian tankers
are smaller than us.
Aren't allowed to be more than 5'7" high. So that definitely piles into it.
I've never looked a lot like the look of my head in any sort of bandana or type thing because I feel like I have a very large head. My father had an even larger head than me. I have a size 58 hat size, whether or not that means anything. When I bought him a hat,
wasn't big enough, huh?
It was, I bought him a size, I think it was like 59 or 60, and I gave it to him and said, no, this is too small, and I had to go out and get him a size 62. And so that's when I realised that, that's...
So Jonas asked, are they comfortable? And I would say if you can squeeze them on with our oversized heads, being overfed Australians, yes, they get quite snug.
Successful Australians.
They get quite snug. Britta is just noting that there's a running steward at a tank museum in Adelaide, and they do rides. So that's something. More reasons to go to Adelaide.
They keep you warm, I reckon.
Well, they've definitely got a warming effect and a very solid padding effect. And there is an argument to be made for soft shells versus hard shells.
But what's it done to my hair?
Yeah, well, you're looking all right. It's looking as good as it gets. Okay, the patrons though. So Artisiva tier, that's the top tier. They get the interview early and the ad-free video and audio of the show. Brian Jenkins, Per, Cornelius, Chris Pezet, Anton Gorbanov, Maxi Mixed, Chicago John, Hans, Johnny Oot, Monty, and Jacob. And then in the apprentice tier, and I do want to note we have a couple of silent patrons who don't want to be named for their work reasons. Thank you. We haven't forgotten you. We do appreciate you. In the apprentice tier, who also get the ad-free audio and video of the show, we have David Mulvaney, Scotch 12, Floaty Burb, Steve Matthews, Jamie Stokes, Keyhook, Jay Beckman Strauss, Hans Vang, Henry Hemmer, Dan Sepienza, Christoph Keller, Tony L, Elliot Spicer, Russell Phillips, Red Rum X1216, Callum, Steve Broomfield, James Van Dyke, and the Rain Man. Okay, in terms of patrons and Apple Bastardry, we do remind people to join up to Patreon on the website where Apple doesn't take a 30% cut because we think Apple has enough money and we don't. Yeah.
I mean, I could be paid $1 trillion a year. What do you think?
I don't think they do. Well, I mean, Apple do make stuff that we want, and we make stuff that some people want, but we would like a little more money for us. Anyway, so do please check out the website totallytank.net to get all the links of the things you need to find. Now, Rob, you're asking on Wednesday, this Wednesday. So if you're listening, what date we say it is? It's
12th.
it's the 8th. So on the 12th, if you're in Canberra,
12th of November in Canberra,
we'll be at the Old Canberra Inn from 7:00 with David Mitchell, Hill Green, the author, having a few beers. If any listeners are around, do please drop by and say hi.
Feel free to come and say hello.
Yeah.
We'll be the guys in the tank t-shirts talking about tanks.
Yeah, well, if you've listened to this, you probably recognise us, but yes, or message us for details. Anyway, so that'll be good.
Come on along, and if you're wearing a tank t-shirt, we'll buy your beer because that's our catch cry.
Yeah, so wear your Totally Tank shirt to get a free beer from us.
Probably buy your beer anyway, even if you're not wearing.
We probably
a tank.
will. If you just turn up, we'll buy you beer.
Turn up. I mean,
oh, this is the Dark Boy, Rob.
It is. It's called a Dortmunder Dark.
All right. So it's DAB, which is the big Dortmund brewery. Raku says RIH Dick Cheney.
Yes.
I got some things to say about Dick Cheney.
We'll get to that.
It's in the script, but he's definitely in hell, Rag, and I like to think that all of his millions of victims are sharpening the pitchforks. We'll get there. Okay. Wow. So we got a black beer, and these are full pint glasses, and this is there's still plenty left in there. Whew. Yeah, this is looking good.
Dab Dortmunder Dark, brewed in Germany. Lots of.
Jonas has asked, is Dick not in purgatory? Look, Dick, sorry, Jonas, I will make the case why I think he's definitely in hell, but we will get there. We're not quite there yet. Oh, this is a lovely dark lager. And it's certified vegan. Look at that, certified vegan.
What is too? Well,
and look,
as a weekday vegetarian, makes my heart proud. Eh?
There isn't just an issue that all beer is technically vegan unless they've used finings, which can be made out of pig's trotters. But that's kind of disgusting, and I don't think it actually improves beer, and I would recommend anyone making their own beer not to use finings. There are other ways to get clarity. But then you get an issue of is yeast an animal or a vegetable? At the moment, it's classified in the vegetable side, but it's really close on the dividing line. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeast is alcohol is God's gift to us all.
Well, there's a very strong argument that yeast actually made humans to reproduce more yeast through a brewing process rather than us adopting yeast. Yeah.
4.8%, 500 ml can.
Look, all beer tastes better in a tall boy. We've said it before. We'll say it again.
Very tasty.
Yeah, and
that's got a nice flavour.
It's got some body without being too heavy, which is where dark lager can really shine. There are many other dark lagers that are as good as this, but this is a good dark lager, and I could drink this all night long.
I don't know if I go all night, but
no, I could. I'm not saying I'd choose to. If I was in a bar full of taps, I'd have one of these and try something else. But
since 1868, there you go.
If I had a case of them, I would happily sit down and
so I guess
smash 5 or 6.
I don't know where Dortmunder Actian Brauer is. I'm assuming
it's the city of Dortmund, I believe.
No, there you go. I'm not.
Yes, Jonas has asked what the ABV is.
4.8.
4.8. So a very sensible and reasonable amount. Ingredients apparently include water, barley, wheat, hops, hop extract, which is a bit shifty if you ask me. Yes, then it's the classic German stuff of purity laws. And
what do we think? All these little coins along the front of
those are medals. The Spira's one, I think.
Medals, we think.
Mm-hmm. Paris. Anyway,
arts, techniques.
Yeah, I mean,
there's little boats, there's columns, there's peoples, Yeah, who knows?
In general, with beer, medals are given on a strict basis of one beer gets the gold, one gets the silver, one gets the bronze. In wine, it's just, it's met a certain technical standard and thus it gets a gold. So you can have, wine bottles covered in 50 gold medals. But beer tends to be a little more selective. I'm not saying I know the rules of every beer competition in the world. They change from place to place. Anyway, this is a good beer, Rob.
Lovely. And it's German.
And it's German.
There you go. That was the big selling point for it. Was I don't think we've done this one before, and it said in nice big letters when I had to try and find it, brewed in Germany.
So if you want to try it out for yourself, it's Dortmunder Dark.
There are other dabs, but this is the Dortmunder Dark.
Oh, I'm going the wrong way there. Let's roll on with the show. Rob, the M1E3, it's due by Christmas.
Look, I'm sure Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is all over this.
Look, I want to just quickly... You brought up Secretary of War Pete Hegseth.
He's in charge.
Yeah.
He's the man. The buck stops with him.
I'm loving that very serious publications in the US are caveating their stories at the end saying, Congress has called it the Department of Defense. To change the name, it requires a act of Congress. That act of Congress has not been passed. Therefore, we will refer to as the Department of Defense and the Secretary of Defense because the name has not actually been changed. And you would, in fact, be able to say that the Secretary of War is a preferred pronoun.
There you go.
Take that, Pete. And, similarly, until they actually... end the shutdown and bring Congress back. Because ruling through personal rule, which is what Trump's essentially doing right now, this is Charles I stuff. So, hopefully
with his head.
Hopefully it ends the same way for him sooner rather than later before too many other people have to die. Anyway, the M1E3, we haven't seen it this month.
No. No, look, he's got another 7 weeks till Christmas.
Yeah.
He might be bringing it out for Christmas. I mean, who doesn't want to get an M1E3 for Christmas? I mean, really, come on.
Yeah, do you think he gets to write it? And they've got to have him writing it into the unveiling. I mean, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's bloody like most robots these days, even if it's bloody just a mock-up, bloody being controlled by a person or whatever else, it's he'll have it. He'll have it by Christmas.
Yeah, well, we hope to see something, but it does. As I look at the development documentation, the stuff they're saying about it, I do feel like it's the Henry Ford faster horses situation. They're not thinking about what the next thing should be. They're asking the people who already use it, how do we improve the thing we have? And there's a time for that. And I would argue that in 2025, with the enormous changes in material sciences and information technology and drones in amongst lots and lots of other things.
Do you know a country that's thinking about all these things and trying to apply them already? It's called China.
They're definitely doing that. I don't see a lot of the M1E3. They're doing some thinking, but I really feel that they need to be a little more blue sky out of the box. Considering the time we live in and the colossal change in capacities that are happening everywhere.
And just the numbers.
Yeah. And it's also enormously...
The Panzer II showed numbers count.
Yeah, it's just enormously concerning that aside from Germany, no one in the West has built a new tank hull in 30 years. That's a concern if you think you need tanks.
Japan has.
Yeah, Japan has. Outside of Europe and the West.
We're going to call Japan and Korea, South Korea
that's
part of the West.
North Asia, but
we're going to call them part of the West, just like Japanese people in apartheid South Africa were called white.
There's a lot going on there. Okay. Big Surge, who I do pay $8 a month to read his monthly missives on Substack. He's not perfect. No, none of us are, but he has a lot of he has a lot of good ideas. Anyway, he wrote an article on where the Ukraine war's up to, and he made the very good point that the Ukrainian language has completely changed in the last year. They're not even trying to evict Russia anymore. They can't. They're just locked in a competition as to which nation can endure more suffering. And that is not a competition a smaller Russian neighbor wants to get into. In fact, being able to absorb suffering is a Russian skill set.
They've developed that one over centuries of that is just what their mindset is, where they're at.
Yeah, that you do not want to.
I mean, the people in Moscow might not like it, and the people in St. Petersburg might not do it, but everyone else in the country really puts up with a lot of rubbish to live in that country.
Yeah. Okay, and we've now seen the rise of the hedgehog tank moving on past the turtles and porcupines, Rob.
Oh, the hedgehog versus porcupine. I mean, it's the same thing, aren't they? But the point being,
I think porcupines can shoot their quills, but these tanks can't shoot their quills. So
where's the kid in a tank, eh?
Well, yeah, the Lowy Institute.
We want to see a tank lay an egg.
The Lowy Institute has written articles about
poison.
Australia wanting an echidna strategy, where Australia tries to just have lots of long-range missiles to stop anyone trying to cross the air sea gap to us.
Yeah,
which I think is quite a valid strategy compared to grovelling subservience to a fading imperial power. But anyway, yes. So what the porcupine tank's doing is raising the cost of Ukrainian drone operations. And that's actually the key to defeating drone operations is to make them...
Where you need 6 to 8 drones to take out one tank rather than one.
Yeah, or you really start bumping that up, and particularly you put the electronic warfare units on the tank, and then the radio frequency drones can't operate and they have to drag fibre optic cable behind them. Sure, you can fit fibre optic cable, but that's weight that's coming out of your flight envelope and coming out of your warhead. So there is value to this. There's just an issue with where these Russian tanks are going, and Western tanks as well, in that they've got EW units just switched on all the time, so they're radiating, giving away their position. They've got radars in their active protection systems on all the time, radiating, giving away their position. And this is why I've got the concept that they actually need a radio intercept officer in the tank to be making some hard calls about when they start turning on the systems and relying on a lot of passive sensors to monitor what the threat environment's looking like.
And hoping the other guy doesn't have long-range artillery that's going to be able to rain down damage on it. Because, you know what? Little bits of wire sticking out to stop drones coming in.
It doesn't stop a 155.
Does not stop a 155 coming in and taking you out, or blowing off your track and then leaving you stranded in the middle of nowhere for those drones to then take their time on you.
There is another issue that's just come out today that apparently there's been thick fog around Pokrovsk, and the Russians have been able to move units through quite rapidly because of the fog limiting drone operations, which does beg the question, why aren't you dumping smoke constantly? But there are a lot of interesting questions, and there's a few more I want to get to about what the Russians are doing, but we'll move on. So there is the good point, though, that raising the cost of drone operations can invalidate them as a useful weapon, because they're only really worth the effort if they're cheap. And if you start making them more and more expensive, and that changes the balance. But there's another issue that's been coming out, that these up-armoured tanks covered in spines and cages and chicken wire and all the rest are getting overloaded, and they're starting to see on the ground in Ukraine that they can't get out of boggy ground. Because
probably a lot more of an issue for the Ukrainian tanks that are used based on Western chassis that are 20
that started at 70 tons.
20 to 30 tons more than the Russian tanks.
Yeah, although at least, it's getting to the issues of the power to weight ratios, and the Russians have essentially, particularly with now that they're reverting back to T-62s as their main tank, still relying on the KV-1, KV-2, but the
T-34.
Yeah, the same power pack that was in a T-34, which was a lot of power in a T-34 and is not a lot of power in a 40-ton tank. Anyway, so the Russians are having issues with that, dealing with the extra weight. They need more powerful engines, but they're going further and further back in time with the available tanks they've got. Now, Rob, Laserpig has had a new video. What did you think of it?
Yes.
As usual with Laserpig, he starts off very strong and he tends to peter off towards the end.
Yeah.
And with us doing 2-hour podcasts about tanks while we drink enormous amounts of beer, we have a lot of sympathy.
I was about to say, that sounds like somebody else I know. But
so Laserpig, his latest video, which he had to repost because he had copyrighted music and they busted him, has done this video about drones as a sort of Halloween post. And friend of the show, Chris from History of Everything, does feature in the B-roll as a amateur drone operator. I reached out to Chris and he confirmed that was him. But it was authentically shot in Ukraine, he's informed me, in particular around Lviv. Look, I agree with Laserpig that the drone threat has been somewhat overstated. But having said that, they do appear to have dramatically changed the battlefield in Ukraine, and they do demand an answer. If you don't have an anti-drone capability in your armoured vehicle, it's going to get smashed by cheap drones.
Yep,
so
very cheap.
You've got to have something, and that can be where the Germans seem to be going, where they put half a flak panzer on the top of the turret to fire 30mm proximity fused rounds.
Probably sourced from our EOS company here in Canberra.
Well, you know, we do provide that service, yeah, or they provide that service. But as we have said before, an army with sufficient fire assets, by which we mean lots of artillery and
you've got air superiority,
and if you've got aircraft with bombs in the sky, doesn't need direct attack drones in the same way, and will get more value from standing them back to act as observers. And the tanks covered in spines and EW units to protect them from drones does suggest a major step forward in what a tank does and is expected to do. And my suspicion is that the very narrow tank doctrine of the US Army is going to need to change to stay effective, and it should be developing the M1E3 before doing... Sorry, it could be that developing the M1E3 before doing the doctrine work is going to be a mistake, because I think... I strongly suspect, looking into the future, a lighter vehicle with a dedicated electronic warfare capability and possibly an anti-aviation capability is going to be what the tank of the future looks like, because it has to clear the sky of these assets.
I mean, my thoughts on it are they've got the chassis already. They've got a reliable general purpose vehicle in the Abrams. If they want to change that around in any way, shape or form, or change a quarter of the fleet in any way, shape or form, they've got it there and they can do that. And they can probably do it in a fairly quick turnaround, whereas developing something new will take longer time and nobody's sure whether or not they like it.
And you've got to figure out what it is you're trying to do. And we've said before, the British Ajax program is a disaster and it's horrible. But they do appear to have been trying to create something in the space that a future tank does need to look like, but they need to not be basing it off the 80s era Ascod chassis, which is meant to be a 20-ton chassis that they've covered in gear till it's a 40-ton vehicle, and then everything's going horribly wrong. But all that said, I don't have any answers as to whether doctrine should follow capabilities or drive it, except that when capabilities are advancing in leaps and bounds for the first time in half a century, you do need to be able to adapt fast. This is my biggest problem with the Americans saying, "Oh, but our doctrinal development takes 10 years." I don't think you've got 10 years to redevelop that.
They might have 10 years to redevelop it, but you don't have 10 years in a shooting war.
Yep. Raghow has noted that Uralvagon Zavod, Russia's main tank manufacturer, has announced large-scale layoffs, and I will get to that because there's I've got some thoughts on what the hell the Russians are doing. I don't have answers. I've got thoughts though. On the point of adaptation, I just want to note that in 1963, Leon Megginson paraphrased Charles Darwin, and it's been misattributed since to Darwin. But the words remain worth thinking about. It is not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. So that's something we definitely need to think about.
All right, and I've thrown one here in just this week. Australia announced that they're talking with Google about setting up a data center on Christmas Island. Now, for those who don't know, Christmas Island is an island Australia has claimed It's about 200 kilometres from south.
It's basically just under Indonesia and quite close to Singapore.
Yeah, and basically the Malacca Straits and so forth. It's a very strategic position.
We've called it our unsinkable aircraft carrier in the past.
But even though they doesn't have the facilities for managing actually defence planes or anything there. But the point being is that they're now looking at setting up a data centre on Christmas Island. And that was to be, the idea as being to then base the communications or the intelligence for any Australian sea or air drone operations from that data centre. So taking out the any need for satellite or other sorts of electronic communications with these things, because they can be done.
It's a Google data center though, so I'm thinking they're trying to sell the defence reasons to get approvals, and the real issue is that Google wants an Australian domiciled data center closer to the Southeast Asian financial markets. But
all these things can be true. In this case, my guess was that I'm guessing the Ghost Bat and which is the Australian built flying drones, long-range flying drones, and the Ghost Shark purveyors, who are, again, the Ghost Shark being the Australian-built undersea submarine drones.
They're both Anduril projects, I believe.
Yeah. But
so Palmer Lucky, who...
The purveyors of these are buying lots of media about...
we will once again say, if you think Palmer Lucky's serious, Google him, have a look at his photos. Tell me if you still think he's serious.
Yeah,
but
they're buying a lot of media ads about why Australia should invest in more drones, and I agree. They probably we should be investing in more drones, because there's a lot of fucking bloody space to cover, and drones will be able to do it. But you got to say, finding somebody serious to do it would be very, very useful. So, and yes, basically out of Christmas Island is probably a good thing to do, but it does make a very small island a very big target.
Now, Raghaus noted they missed an opportunity with Ghost Shark. They could have called it the Holt, which is a reference to Australian Prime Minister Harold Holt, who disappeared while swimming and
snorkeling.
Anyway, he went for a swim and he never came back. There's theories a Chinese submarine picked him up because he'd already been an agent for them, which I just don't see a Conservative Prime Minister of Australia being a Chinese agent. Yes, and we did name a swimming pool in his honour. So
I mean, Harold E. Holt is one of the major communications defence sites in outback Western Australia that it does all this sort of stuff, the sneaky peeky stuff.
Yeah. Okay, now moving on, Ukraine and Russia have been locked in a conflict of adaptation, and the real winner from this war will be the country that is willing to change the way it does things to learn from the lessons. Another thing that's been coming up out of the Ukraine war is the new hyper-surveilled battlefields, and they're finding it easier to defend open ground than cities, particularly around Pokrovsk. The Russians are infiltrating, and then the Ukrainian drone wall is not working when it's dealing with all the walls in cities. In cities, infiltrators have no shortage of cover. Out in the open, the defenders can see what's coming at them and have long firing lines. And while this might seem counterintuitive, for most of human military history, commanders have cleared the ground around their fortifications for just this sort of reason. On the other hand, defenders still need cover and places to sleep and eat, and the trick is to place the open ground between your strong point and the enemy. And the enemy always gets a vote in these things. So if you want to defend your homeland, plant more trees, grow some mountains, or build a jungle.
That was my line.
Yeah, it was, but you didn't put your initial on them. So
Sorry.
Here I am. Okay. Now, it's worth noting, Trenchard had a story that the Russians are basically, the T-62 is now their backbone tank of their army because they've burned through everything better and they're still pulling old hulls out.
I was about to say the T-72s have gone, or they don't want to waste their T-72s, but they could just drag more T-62s out of storage and say, yeah, look, that'll do. It's only going to last 6 weeks. So what else we're going to, we don't want to waste our resources, but whereas we can throw these old stuff in and claim a capital loss.
Yeah, look, anyway, I'll move on. At this point in the war, I think people should be asking more, where are the new Russian tanks? It's been 3 years into a major conflict, and at this point, you would expect new production to be delivering thousands of modern tanks a year. So something appears to be seriously amiss in the Russian tank factories and Russian production. Now, it's partly when you've got so many old tanks, it's like, well, what's it worth to build something new? But something is badly going wrong.
And what about the layoffs that were mentioned before?
Yeah, well, that feeds into the things are going horribly wrong. Yeah, it's. I don't quite understand why new tanks aren't being built when they seem to be that important. And we said last year that the Russians were going to run out of tanks around mid-2025, and they basically halted armoured operations for 6 months to husband the resources, and they're falling back on T-62s now, and they've definitely got a lot of old T-55s in storage, and the 55's got some merits to it, but you really would think at this point there's more value in building a new hull than, because steel is cheap and air is free, than continuously just digging up the old ones out of pits. But in happier news, Rob, Dick Cheney is dead, and Rob will now sing "Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead." Take it away, Rob.
Now, I ascribe to the William Shatner verse of singing of "Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead." Witch, old witch, the wicked witch. Ding dong, the wicked witch is dead. And just remember, he's the guy who shot his friend in the face whilst hunting and then made his friend apologise to him. This is the kind of man he was.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that Dick Cheney, he might have hated Trump for being bad for business, but he started wars which destroyed the lives of millions, cost the US trillions of dollars, and that his personal business interests profited from. He did it so that Halliburton shareholders would make more money, and he was the major shareholder. He was a major shareholder, to be technically precise. He impoverished the American people in the process and wrecked the lives of thousands of veterans and their families, and that's before we count the toll in the entire nations that were his victims. He's in hell, and the men, women, and children who died for Halliburton profits are sharpening pitchforks for him. And then just moving on from that to some happier news. Recently, while Cheney definitely sent tanks rolling, Zoran winning in New York is outside the scope of this podcast.
Who?
Yeah, Zoran Mandami. But I do note that offering people the promise of something better and that the power of government can be used to improve their lives remains a powerful and worthwhile message. And, Rob, we've got some personal knowledge of this, that when politicians promise to improve material conditions and then fail to, they are held to a high standard on that, and that's a good thing. Yes. Okay. I think we're at the end of the show, Rob.
We are.
Yeah. Cool. How long have we been going? Oh,
2 hours.
Coming up on 2 hours.
Let's have a look at the poll.
Yes. So the poll says from 17 votes, 24% said the Panzer II was a misguided stopgap, and 76% said it was all the tank they needed. I think, obviously, both answers probably have a bit of truth to them, but it is significant that they succeeded most when they actually had the lightly armoured, undergunned tank, but used it really well, and that when they got into actually having the heavier tanks that they wanted, things actually went badly for them.
It was also the opposition learned what was going on and said, we need to actually do something about these fascists and put some effort into defeating them, rather than standing around saying, those communists are really bad. We should make sure they don't get any power and appease these fascists. Rather than saying, these fascists are really bad and we should do something about stopping them. And once they figured out that point, the war changed.
Yeah, I think that's worth thinking about. Let's ponder that deeply in the coming month. All right, folks, so thank you so much for our...
Those Canberra-based people who want to come out to Old Canberra Inn with us on Wednesday nights will be around, and there on the 12th of November. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right, take care.
But in general, thank you to everyone who's listened all the way through, and we will be back in your ears or in your faces soon.
Before Christmas.
Yeah, before Christmas.
There you go.
Nice one.
Cheers.